Freedom or illusion? Imagine standing at a quiet crossroad, illuminated only by the dim glow of a streetlight. The world is still, and time feels suspended. In this moment, a question surfaces. Which path will I choose, and more importantly, why? Is this choice truly yours, or are unseen forces at work? Biological instincts, societal conditioning, or even the determination laws of physics guiding your every step. Free will, the ability to act independently of constraints, is more than just an abstract concept. It is the foundation upon which our sense of self, morality, and responsibility is built. Yet, it is also one of the most contested ideas in human thought. Across disciplines, science, philosophy, and theology, scholars have debated its existence for centuries, often reaching contradictory conclusions. Some argue it is an undeniable truth, while others dismiss it as an elaborate illusion. Why does free will matter so much? Because it defines how we view ourselves and others. If you believe your actions are freely chosen, you might feel empowered to shape your destiny. Conversely, if free will is an illusion, then what does that say about accountability? Can a criminal truly be held responsible for their crimes, or are they simply playing out the inevitable? Does a lack of free will diminish the meaning of our accomplishments, or perhaps even our lives? To explore these questions, this video will embark on a journey through time and ideas. We will examine the origins of free will, its role in shaping civilizations, and the challenges it faces in the modern world. From the ancient teachings of Aristotle to the groundbreaking experiments of neuroscience, we will unravel the intricate web of thought surrounding this profound concept. But as we begin, consider this. If you pause this video now, will it be because you chose to, or because you were always destined to? To understand the nature of free will, we must first trace its origins. How did humanity arrive at the concept of individual autonomy, the belief that our choices are ours alone to make? The history of free will is one of deep inquiry, shaped by philosophy, religion, and later science. The idea of free will can be traced back to the ancient Greeks. Aristotle was among the first to define voluntary actions as those performed with knowledge and without external compulsion. He argued that humans, unlike animals, possess the capacity for reason, allowing us to deliberate and make choices. However, even Aristotle recognized that human behavior is influenced by external factors, such as upbringing and circumstance. Centuries later, this line of thought evolved through the works of philosophers like Augustine of Hippo, who introduced a spiritual dimension to the discussion. In Augustine's view, free will was both a divine gift and a source of moral responsibility. He believed humans could choose good or evil, but this freedom was constrained by original sin, a theological perspective that would dominate Western thought for centuries. Fast forward to the Enlightenment, where figures like René Descartes brought free will into the realm of metaphysics. Descartes, known for his famous assertion, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, saw free will as a hallmark of the human soul, independent of physical causation. In his dualist framework, the mind was immaterial and sovereign, capable of influencing the mechanistic body. This separation of mind and body laid the groundwork for modern debates on consciousness and free will. Theological doctrines have long grappled with free will, particularly in the context of divine omniscience. If God knows everything, including our future actions, how can we claim to act freely? This dilemma became central in the writings of Thomas Aquinas, who argued that God's foreknowledge does not negate human freedom. In his view, God exists outside of time, seeing past, present, and future simultaneously, much like an observer watching a parade from above. In contrast, predestination, a belief popularized by figures like John Calvin, suggested that human choices are preordained by God. According to this perspective, free will is an illusion. Our lives unfold according to divine design. Such theological debates highlight the tension between individual autonomy and higher powers, a conflict that persists in modern religious thought. With the advent of the scientific revolution, the discussion of free will shifted from metaphysics to empirical observation. The deterministic worldview championed by Isaac Newton portrayed the universe as a giant clockwork machine governed by immutable laws of cause and effect. If every action has a prior cause, where does free will fit in? Despite this mechanistic outlook, philosophers like Immanuel Kant defended the idea of moral autonomy. Kant argued that while the physical world operates under deterministic laws, humans belong to a noumenal realm of reason and freedom. This dual perspective allowed for free will to coexist with natural causation, albeit in a limited capacity. By the 20th century, free will faced new challenges from psychology and neuroscience. Sigmund Freud, for instance, emphasized the role of unconscious desires and past experiences in shaping behavior, undermining the notion of conscious choice. Later, experiments like those of Benjamin Libet, which we will explore in detail, suggested that decisions are made in the brain before we become aware of them. These findings called into question the very foundation of free will, igniting fierce debates among scientists and philosophers alike. Today, the history of free will is a mosaic of ideas, some complementary, others contradictory. It reflects humanity's enduring struggle to understand our place in the universe. As we move forward, the question remains, are we truly free, or are we the product of forces beyond our control? Let's now explore how science has sought to answer this timeless question. As philosophy and theology debated the essence of free will, science took on a different challenge, not to ask whether free will exists in a metaphysical sense, but to explore how human decision-making actually works. With the rise of neuroscience and psychology, a new question emerged. Are our choices as free as they feel, or are they simply the result of biological processes beyond our control? In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted a groundbreaking experiment that would redefine discussions of free will. Participants were asked to perform a simple task: flex their wrists whenever they felt the urge. They reported the moment they became consciously aware of the decision, while their brain activity was measured through an EEG. The results were shocking. Libet found that the brain's readiness potential, a measurable buildup of neural activity, occurred hundreds of milliseconds before participants became aware of their decision. In other words, the brain had already decided to act before the individual consciously chose to do so. This finding sparked widespread controversy. If decisions are initiated by unconscious brain activity, does that mean free will is an illusion? Libet himself stopped short of denying free will entirely, suggesting that while we may not initiate actions freely, we still have the ability to veto them, a concept he called free won't. Critics, however, argue that his experiment oversimplifies human decision-making by focusing on trivial actions, such as wrist movements. More recent studies have expanded upon Libet's work, using advanced technologies like functional MRI to delve deeper into the brain's role in decision-making. Some experiments have even demonstrated the ability to predict a person's choice up to 7 seconds before they consciously make it. These findings suggest that our sense of agency, our belief that we are actively making decisions, might be a constructed narrative created by the brain to make sense of its own processes. However, these results are not without their limitations. Predicting simple binary decisions in a controlled lab environment is vastly different from understanding the complex, deliberative processes behind significant life choices, such as choosing a career or deciding to marry. Neuroscience is far from unraveling the intricate interplay between consciousness, biology, and decision-making. While neuroscience questions the mechanics of free will, psychology examines its impact on behavior. Studies have shown that simply altering people's beliefs about free will can dramatically influence their actions. For example, 1. Increased cheating. When participants were told that free will doesn't exist, they were more likely to cheat on tests. 2. Decreased motivation. Belief in a lack of free will led to reduced effort in tasks requiring self-control. These findings suggest that free will, whether real or not, serves an important social and psychological function. Believing in our autonomy encourages accountability, fosters motivation, and helps maintain social order. As artificial intelligence advances, the question of free will takes on a new dimension. Machine learning algorithms can predict human behavior with astonishing accuracy, from our shopping habits to our political preferences. In some cases, these systems seem to know us better than we know ourselves. This raises unsettling questions. 1. If our choices can be predicted with such precision, how much autonomy do we truly have? 2. Are we freely choosing, or merely reacting to, a set of predefined inputs? Moreover, the integration of AI into daily life, through decision-making algorithms, personalized recommendations, and even autonomous vehicles, blurs the line between human agency and external control. If we rely on machines to guide our choices, are we surrendering our free will, or simply redefining it? The scientific investigation into free will challenges us to rethink what it means to act freely. While the evidence may suggest that our decisions are shaped by unconscious processes, the full picture remains elusive. Are we puppets controlled by our biology, or is there still room for genuine autonomy? As we turn to philosophy, we will explore how thinkers have grappled with these questions and the frameworks they propose to reconcile freedom with causation. Philosophy has always been the battleground for free will, where thinkers have struggled to reconcile freedom with causation. As science raises doubts about the mechanics of choice, philosophy provides the intellectual frameworks to question the essence of autonomy. Are we free, or do we merely feel free? Compatibilists argue that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. Even in a universe governed by cause and effect, they believe humans can still act freely as long as their actions align with their desires and intentions, uncoerced by external forces. Philosopher David Hume famously supported this view, suggesting that free will is about acting in accordance with one's will, not about breaking the laws of nature. For example, if you decide to walk to the store and no one physically restrains you, that act is free, even if your decision was influenced by prior experiences or circumstances. Critics of compatibilism, however, argue that it fails to address the deeper question. If our desires themselves are shaped by factors beyond our control, how can we claim ownership of our choices? In contrast, libertarians, not to be confused with the political ideology, insist that free will requires the ability to do otherwise, even under identical conditions. According to this view, determinism is incompatible with freedom. True autonomy arises only when individuals can act independently of external causation. Philosopher Robert Kane, a leading proponent of libertarianism, introduces the concept of self-forming actions. He argues that while much of our behavior may be influenced by past events, there are critical moments, decisions made under moral or existential conflict, where we exercise true agency and shape our future selves. Yet this view faces its own challenges. Critics often point out that if free will exists outside the chain of causation, it risks falling into randomness. If our choices are not determined by anything, how can they be rational or meaningful? On the opposite end of the spectrum lies hard determinism, the belief that free will is an illusion. Figures like philosopher Sam Harris argue that every decision we make is the result of preceding events and biological processes. According to this perspective, our actions are as predictable as the motion of planets, governed by the unyielding laws of physics. Hard determinists challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths. If free will is an illusion, does that absolve individuals of responsibility? Harris suggests that recognizing this could lead to a more compassionate society, one that focuses on rehabilitation rather than punishment, understanding that criminals act not out of freedom but out of circumstance. If determinism undermines free will, could indeterminism, randomness, rescue it? This question introduces another paradox. Imagine your decisions are governed by pure chance, like the roll of a die. Would this randomness restore your freedom, or would it only replace one form of control with another? Philosopher Peter van Inwagen highlights this dilemma in his consequence argument. He contends that neither determinism nor indeterminism comfortably supports free will. In a deterministic world, our actions are inevitable. In a random world, they are meaningless. At the heart of these debates lies a profound question: can morality exist without free will? Many philosophers argue that concepts like justice and accountability hinge on the assumption that individuals are free to choose their actions. Without this, how can we hold people responsible? Compatibilists like Daniel Dennett argue that moral responsibility does not require metaphysical freedom. Instead, it depends on practical considerations. Whether an individual can respond to reasons, understand consequences, and control their behavior. In this view, a deterministic understanding of human behavior does not diminish the importance of ethics, it refines it. However, skeptics worry that removing free will from morality risks undermining the foundations of justice. If no one is truly responsible for their actions, what grounds do we have for praise, blame, or punishment? Philosophy does not offer easy answers to the riddle of free will. Instead, it presents a spectrum of perspectives, each grappling with the complexities of human autonomy. From compatibilists who reconcile freedom with causation, to libertarians who defend the possibility of true agency, to determinists who deny free will entirely, every position challenges us to rethink what it means to act, to choose, and to be. Next, we turn to theology to explore how free will intersects with divine omniscience and predestination. Can humans be free in a world governed by God? When discussing free will, theology brings a unique perspective, one that intertwines human autonomy with divine omnipotence and omniscience. For centuries, religious scholars have grappled with the paradox of how humans can act freely in a world governed by an all-powerful, all-knowing deity. Is free will compatible with the existence of God, or does divine sovereignty render it an illusion? Imagine this: if God knows everything, past, present, and future, then God already knows what you will do tomorrow. But if your actions are already known, how can they be free? This is the classic paradox of divine foreknowledge and free will. Theologians like Augustine and Aquinas sought to resolve this tension by redefining God's relationship with time. Augustine argued that God exists outside of time, observing all events simultaneously rather than sequentially. From this vantage point, God's foreknowledge does not constrain human freedom. Instead, it is akin to a person watching a parade from above, seeing the whole procession at once without influencing its flow. But does this solve the problem? Critics point out that if God's knowledge of the future is infallible, then our actions must unfold as foreseen, leaving no room for deviation. In this view, free will becomes a comforting illusion, incompatible with the concept of a perfect, omniscient God. Predestination, the belief that all events, including human actions, are preordained by God, poses an even greater challenge to free will. Prominent in Calvinist theology, predestination suggests that our choices and destinies are part of God's unchangeable plan. While this doctrine emphasizes divine sovereignty, it raises profound ethical and existential questions. If God has predetermined every decision, are we merely actors in a script we didn't write, and we still be held morally accountable for our actions? Some theologians, like John Calvin, reconcile this by proposing compatibilist frameworks. They argue that human actions, though determined by God, remain voluntary because they align with our desires and inclinations. However, detractors find this unsatisfying. questioning whether voluntary actions can be truly free if shaped entirely by external forces. In contrast, libertarian theologians defend the notion of genuine free will, even in the context of divine sovereignty. They argue that God, in His omnipotence, endowed humanity with the capacity for autonomous choice, allowing us to act independently of divine causation. Philosopher Alvin Plantinga introduced the concept of trans-world depravity to support this view. He suggested that God, despite being all-powerful, cannot force humans to choose good without undermining their freedom. By allowing humans to make their own choices, even morally wrong ones, God preserves the integrity of free will at the cost of permitting evil in the world. The relationship between free will and morality takes on new dimensions in theology. If God determines or foresees all actions, how does this affect divine justice? Aquinas suggested that God's justice operates differently from human justice. While we might judge individuals based on their choices, God considers the entirety of creation, weaving human actions, both good and evil, into a greater, unknowable plan. This perspective aligns with the biblical notion of God as a perfect judge, who balances mercy with justice. However, critics of this view argue that it diminishes individual accountability. If all actions serve God's purpose, how can we justify eternal punishment or reward? Recent theological movements like open theism offer alternative approaches. Open theism posits that God's omniscience is dynamic. God knows all possible outcomes but does not determine which will occur. This allows humans to act freely, with God responding to their choices in real time. This perspective reframes God not as a deterministic architect, but as a relational being, engaged with creation in a way that preserves human freedom. While controversial in traditional circles, open theism seeks to reconcile divine sovereignty with genuine free will, offering a more participatory vision of God's role in human life. Theology pushes the boundaries of free will, confronting questions that transcend science and philosophy. Whether through the paradox of predestination, the challenge of divine justice, or the search for compatibility between omniscience and freedom, theological debates offer profound insights into the nature of human agency. Next, we'll examine how free will plays out in the real world, its implications for society, law, and personal responsibility. While debates about free will often seem abstract, their implications are deeply embedded in the fabric of our everyday lives. From legal systems to social norms and personal accountability, the idea of free will profoundly influences how we live, judge, and interact with one another. What happens when this foundational concept is challenged? Can society thrive without a belief in free will? At the core of modern justice systems lies an assumption: individuals are morally and legally responsible for their actions. This presupposes that people act freely, making conscious choices between right and wrong. But what if free will is an illusion? Imagine a court where a defendant argues, "I had no choice, my brain made me do it." Neuroscientific evidence is already being introduced in legal cases to challenge traditional notions of culpability. For instance, studies showing abnormalities in the brains of violent offenders have been used to argue for reduced sentences on the grounds of diminished responsibility. This raises a critical question. If our actions are driven by unconscious processes, how do we distinguish between those who are responsible and those who are not? Legal theorists grapple with whether justice systems should focus less on punishment and more on rehabilitation, treating criminal behavior as a product of biology and environment rather than moral failing. Beyond the courtroom, belief in free will plays a significant role in shaping societal behavior. Research has shown that when people are exposed to ideas undermining free will, their behavior changes in measurable ways. 1. Cheating and dishonesty. Participants who read articles claiming free will is an illusion were more likely to cheat on tasks. 2. Aggression. reduced belief in free will has been linked to increased impulsive and aggressive behavior. 3. Altruism and motivation. People who doubt free will often report feeling less motivated to help others or work toward personal goals. These findings suggest that even if free will is illusory, the belief in it serves an important psychological and social function. It fosters accountability, encourages pro-social behavior, and provides individuals with a sense of purpose and control. At an individual level, the concept of free will shapes how we perceive our own lives. Believing in autonomy can empower people to take responsibility for their actions and strive for self-improvement. Conversely, a deterministic worldview can lead to feelings of helplessness and fatalism, where individuals see themselves as mere products of circumstance. Consider the example of addiction. Is an addict responsible for their actions? While neuroscience shows that addiction alters brain chemistry in ways that limit self-control, successful recovery often hinges on the belief that change is possible, a belief grounded in the notion of free will. In the digital age, the concept of free will faces new challenges. Algorithms and AI systems increasingly shape our decisions, from what we buy to how we vote. These systems predict our preferences with uncanny accuracy, often nudging us towards specific choices without our conscious awareness. This raises ethical concerns about the erosion of autonomy. Are we truly free when our choices are influenced or even dictated by data-driven technologies? And if these systems can predict human behavior so precisely, does that confirm determinism? Furthermore, the rise of technologies like brain-computer interfaces and neuroprosthetics blurs the line between human agency and machine control. As these tools become more integrated into our lives, they force us to reconsider what it means to act freely. The real-world implications of free will are profound and far-reaching, whether in the justice system, social behavior, personal accountability, or the realm of technology. Our understanding, or misunderstanding, of free will shapes the world we live in. As we grapple with these challenges, one thing becomes clear. Even if free will is an illusion, it is one we cannot afford to abandon. In our final section, we'll step back and reflect on the broader meaning of free will, summarizing the key ideas we've explored and posing one last question. What does it mean to be human, if our freedom is not what it seems? Free will, perhaps no concept cuts closer to the heart of what it means to be human. It's the invisible thread running through our morality, our justice systems, and our very sense of self. Yet, as we've explored, it is also one of the most elusive and contentious ideas in human thought. 1. Philosophical roots. Free will has been debated for millennia, from Aristotle's voluntary actions to the Enlightenment's emphasis on rational autonomy. 2. Scientific challenges. Neuroscience suggests our brains may act before we consciously decide, raising doubts about whether our choices are truly ours. 3. Theological paradoxes. Divine omniscience and predestination complicate the idea of free will, yet many theologians argue for a nuanced coexistence between human freedom and divine sovereignty. 4. Real-world impacts. Belief in free will underpins legal accountability, social behavior, and personal motivation. Even if it is an illusion, abandoning the idea could have profound societal consequences. Despite centuries of inquiry, free will remains unresolved. Is it an emergent property of consciousness, a useful fiction, or something entirely beyond our current understanding? The stakes of this debate are immense. If free will does not exist, our justice systems, moral frameworks, and societal structures may need to be reimagined. On the other hand, if free will is real, understanding its mechanisms could unlock new ways to empower individuals and enhance collective well-being. But perhaps the greatest reason free will matters lies in its connection to meaning. As humans, we long to believe that our choices shape our lives, that our struggles and triumphs are truly ours. If free will is merely an illusion, Does this diminish the value of our experiences, or does it make them all the more remarkable? In the end, the mystery of free will is as much about what it reveals as what it obscures. It forces us to confront the boundaries of human understanding and to ask profound questions about our place in the universe. So, as we conclude, consider this. If free will is an illusion, but one that inspires greatness, creativity, and love, should it matter whether it's real? And if free will does exist, are we ready to accept the weight of that responsibility? Thank you for joining this journey through the intricate web of free will. The questions we've explored may not have definitive answers, but they invite us to think deeply about who we are and who we might yet become. Now, it's your turn. What do you believe?